her face a mask of hate, her wrists bound in polished steel handcuffs.
Washington, D.C. was a city built on secrets, but some were more dangerous than others. Melville Taylor of the Secret Service stood before a small, old-fashioned safe in the State Department. It looked untouched, yet the impossible had happened. The Carruthers Code, the most efficient cipher system in the world, was gone. Not a bulky book, but a master key, a single slip of paper 6 inches long. The undersecretary was frantic. Whoever took it didn't need a combination. A faint circular mark on the safe's front told the story. The thief had used a stethoscope to listen to the falling tumblers. It was clean, professional, and silent.
There was only one lead. The night watchman swore he saw Mrs. Madelaine Prentice, the wife of the third assistant secretary, enter the building at 9:20 and leave 10 minutes later. He knew her by her distinctive green evening cape, trimmed in fur. But Taylor had a problem. He knew the Prentices, and he knew his best asset in the social world, Madelaine James. When Taylor found Madelaine, she delivered a bombshell. Mrs. Prentice hadn't been at the State Department. She had been at a dinner party at the Westovers all night, surrounded by witnesses.
It's simple, Melville. Someone didn't just steal a code, they stole an identity. They wore a replica of that green cloak, turned up the collar to muffle their voice, and walked right past your watchman.
Madelaine's mind immediately turned to a woman who had been haunting the Secret Service's periphery for months, Lelia Armitage, a stunningly beautiful widow with no visible source of income, a love for army officials, and eyes that revealed nothing. Madelaine's intuition, what a man might call a hunch, told her Armitage was a super spy. A few well-placed bills to a maid confirmed it. Mrs. Armitage owned a green fur-trimmed cloak.
The trap was set at a grand diplomatic reception. Among the glittering diamonds and flowing champagne, the air was thick with tension. Madelaine watched as Mrs. Armitage glided through the room, occasionally topping a thick gold bracelet on her wrist, a signal to a foreign ambassador waiting in the wings. Near midnight, Madelaine lured Armitage into a secluded side room. When Taylor arrived, he found a shocking tableau. The elegant Mrs. Armitage was backed against a wall, her face a mask of hate, her wrists bound in polished steel handcuffs.
The paper?
Taylor asked, looking at the empty table.
Snap open the bracelet,
Madelaine directed. Inside the hollow gold jewelry lay a tightly wrapped spindle of paper, the Carruthers Code.
Taylor reported to his boss the next morning. After hearing the full story, the chief made a decision.
We've got the code back. That's what matters. Let's not make this a bigger mess than it needs to be. The diplomatic fallout from arresting a society woman who's connected to half of Washington would be a nightmare.
Mrs. Armitage vanished from Washington the next day. The service kept the recovery quiet, preferring to let well enough alone. Months later, a package arrived for Taylor. It contained a single photograph of Lelia Armitage in her sable coat, a final tribute to the woman who almost won. But Taylor was no longer interested in the chase. He was too busy with his new bride, the woman whose intuition had saved the state, Madelaine James.